Hello everyone, and welcome back to more CBT for my OCD. I have my book to hand. I have my free therapy dogs, as you can see. I'll get you a good look, see. So, let's begin, shall we? Hopefully you remember who I am. I wouldn't normally remember, that's why I have these bookmarks. Okay, and shall we begin, everyone? When is it not OCD? Rumination is a psychological process that accompanies many different disorders. For example, in depression, people commonly ruminate about why things went wrong for them. Yes, I know. Or why they are so worthless. Feeling a bit called out here, people. Will admit, this type of rumination tends to focus on past events and keeps the person's mood very low. Now this is me. This is how I've been lately. In everyday life, rumination accompanies everyday stress. Mulling things over may help us to work out how to progress with certain problems. However, taken to a clinical level, unhealthy rumination or worry is part of a problem known as generalized anxiety disorder, otherwise known as GAD. I suppose you could call that GAD. Hello everyone, I have GAD. How's that sound? Hello viewers, I have GAD. What do you reckon? No? Alright then. In which worries about everyday matters take over the person's life. People with GAD are constantly worrying about all sorts of disasters and pitfalls that may or may not happen. For example, what if I can't pay my next gas bill? Or, what if my husband leaves me? The worry dominates to the extent that they cannot enjoy the positive things in life. They often begin to worry about the fact that they are worrying, and this becomes a vicious circle. Rumination in OCD differs in that the anxiety is caused by the actual experience of having a negative thought in the first place, rather than worrying too much about a number of everyday topics. The anxiety stems from the feeling that having such a thought seems to signify something bad about you and that you need to deal with the thought by thinking more about it. How does rumination become a problem? As with all forms of OCD, people with ruminations are often very careful and conscientious by nature. Increases in stress and levels of responsibility may contribute to rumination in a general sense. In some cases, the onset is a clear experience of a particular negative thought in a certain context that filled the person with anxiety and dread. Rumination describes a style of responding to intrusive thoughts. The content can be very varied, entirely individual, and can also change over time for the same person. What is also true is that they find the thoughts they are having troublesome and anxiety-provoking. The reason that intrusive thoughts bother an individual is because for them the thought could indicate that something is true about them that they find particularly abhorrent. What this means varies from person to person. For example, a new mother may be horrified by an intrusive thought of smothering her child, as it could mean that she is a terrible person capable of something awful. In rumination OCD, the person gets absorbed into trying to understand the content of the thoughts and what it means to have the thought in the first place. The meaning of thoughts. In combination with general background circumstances, the specific beliefs about the nature and importance of thoughts are very important in the development of rumination OCD. It is common to believe that if I think something bad, it is the same as doing something bad, and if I have a thought, I must want it to happen. Beliefs also play an important role in how people then respond to disturbing thoughts. Frequent examples are, it is wrong to ignore thoughts, and I cannot take the risk of the thought coming true. That is something worth thinking about, I think. Mental argument and the need for certainty. Rumination often includes grappling with the meaning of the thought to try to decide whether or not it is true. As the interpretation is often very frightening for the person, for example, am I bad, mad or perverted? Understandably, they frequently want to be absolutely sure that they are not what they fear before moving on. The argument needs to be settled. The The difficulty here is that the argument is futile because the intrusive thought or doubt is just random mental junk. Engaging in a mental argument makes the thought feel more important and believable. Are you with me here, people? I hope you are. For many things that are the focus of obsessive ruminations, it is hard to be completely certain that they are not true. How can you prove to yourself beyond any doubt that you are a good person? We can probably all think of an example where we acted impulsively, offended someone, or otherwise did something wrong, or had what might be a sexual thought that didn't fit with our sexual orientation. Does that mean that we are bad, or somehow lying to ourselves? In reality, these sorts of characteristics are more complex than that. Shades of grey rather than black and white. Just because you can think of an example of not being 100% good does not mean that you are 100% bad. So if you think about whether you are 100% certain about these types of attributes, if you really search yourself, a doubt will most likely cross your mind, however small. This is particularly difficult if you need to be certain before you can allow yourself to move on and stop thinking about something. In fact, the more you try to be certain, the less certain you feel. In this way, people can get stuck in loops of rumination. In rumination OCD, the person gets absorbed into trying to understand the content of the thoughts. However, the process that primarily keeps the problem going is the rumination itself. Take an example. Jeremy became a parent for the first time in his early 30s. He always thought of himself as a responsible person and was looking forward to the birth of his child. He and his partner were thrilled when the little girl arrived and were very careful in loving parents. When the baby was 6 weeks old, Jeremy was changing her nappy when he had the thought, "You might die." Jeremy was instantly filled with a feeling of dread and wondered why this thought had come into his mind at some point. The anxiety was so strong that he had a terrible fear that this could mean that even though it was the last thing he wanted, perhaps somewhere deep down he had negative thoughts about his own child. Although he wasn't particularly superstitious about other things, this felt too important to ignore. He had read newspaper stories about men killing their children and worried about falling into that state of mind. Whatever it was. He said carefully to himself, "I don't want you to die, I'll keep you safe." He then had a worry that these were just words and that he did not really mean them. Jim began to look for evidence that he loved the baby and did not want anything bad to happen to her. Jeremy experienced a negative intrusive thought at a time when he felt happy and was looking after his vulnerable new baby. As the thought was completely unexpected and did not fit with the situation, it stood out in his thinking, which made it feel important. Jeremy's first reaction was that it actually meant that something dreadful would happen. His beliefs about the importance of thoughts made his unexpectedly negative thought very difficult to ignore. As he struggled to understand the thought, he felt morning anxiety about his own feelings towards the baby, and with each attempt to reassure himself, he felt more doubt. As his anxiety rose, he felt more afraid that he was going to lose control. Poor Jeremy. How does a rumination problem get worse? What do you reckon, people? You know what? Don't answer that. I'll read on. The book can tell us. A common pitfall in OCD is to think that because I feel anxious, there must be something wrong. This is particularly toxic as the meaning given to the thought causes anxiety, which is then taken as evidence that the interpretation was correct. This is circular reasoning, but can be very powerful when you're stuck in a pattern of rumination. Something feels true, then true. This does not make it true, although it seems a part of human nature to give credibility to these feelings. Many gamblers fall on foul feeling lucky when they place their bet which lost them everything. And so we have a little diagram. You can read that, I think, people. I'll leave it on for a few more seconds so you have time to pause and look. So, if you didn't read or didn't pause, I shall quickly explain it. It's a circle. At the top you have anxious thoughts. Let's get this going right. Which then goes into having the thought means something bad, which leads to an increase in anxiety, which then leads to the more anxious thoughts. Ugh. Ain't worse than an itchy nose. Magical thinking. Superstitions are common to all societies. The specifics vary immensely from putting shoes on a table to walking under a ladder or breaking a mirror. In each case, going against the superstition will somehow cause something bad to happen eventually. There is no mechanism by which these things can cause bad luck. So it is by some sort of magic that this happens. The ideas are so ingrained within society that it is common to feel dread or anxiety when you break a superstition. Even if you consider yourself a very rational person, in the course of life, sooner or later, any given person will have something bad happen to them, or to someone they love, and it is common to attribute this to bringing bad luck on yourself by having broken a superstitious belief. Needless to say, many good things will happen in the same time period, but these are readily ignored. This sort of general and non-specific association fuels the idea that going against a superstition somehow caused a bad thing to happen. Magical thinking can play a role in rumination problems by the coincidence of events that lead to someone assuming a causal link. The meaning of mental argument. Rumination, the going over of thoughts and events, increases doubt and anxiety. I think we've established this bit already. Because of this, it can also undermine people's confidence in themselves, can therefore seem to support their beliefs about being bad or dangerous. Third problem is that sometimes people develop an additional belief that they may be going mad because they're ruminating for hours. In these terms, if they accept the thoughts and stop ruminating, they're bad, and if they stay stuck in OCD, they feel like they're crazy. This is a very tangled OCD web. And now, we go back to Jeremy. Jeremy became ultra careful when doing anything for the baby, especially when he was changing a nappy. He would approach his task with trepidation and could feel himself getting anxious as the time approached in case he had a bad thought. He would always say to himself before doing this that he loved the baby very much, and that he did not want her to die. He would list the reasons for this to himself: that he looked after the baby, that he wanted the baby, that he had wanted the baby. Yet sometimes when he looked at the baby, he found it very difficult to be certain that he was feeling complete love. He wondered if he was kidding himself, that he was just playing a role. Maybe he was capable of doing something bad and was having all of these crazy thoughts. He did not talk about his intrusive thoughts, but he asked for a lot of reassurance from friends and family that he was a nice person. Poor Jeremy. The more Jeremy ruminated, the more anxious he felt, and the more he felt driven to ruminate in order to really understand whether or not he was dangerous. Trying to search himself for evidence he loved his baby only made the problem worse, as it was very difficult to define what he was looking for, and therefore impossible to actually find a definitive answer. This only made him feel more anxious, and he got more intrusive thoughts that seemed to suggest the opposite. And so we have another little diagram thing. There you go. That is readable, so I'm going to leave that on there for 5 more seconds. 3, 2, 1, and it's gone. Now, that isn't long enough, but you can pause it. There's a good window to pause it, so you can have a look at it then. What happens if the OCD carries on growing? And that is a good question, one which I'm asking myself, or the book I should say, and the book, it seems, is going to answer this for us. Once rumination takes hold, it can begin to interfere with many parts of life and even to take over. You may find that it is taking a lot of time and making it hard to be around people, as your mind is so full of these thoughts. They are probably also keeping your mood very low. Sometimes you might feel anxious or resentful at others for interpreting your ruminations or saying something that triggers a new set of rumination. So we have a new bit. Rumination. Avoidance. Trying to keep yourself safe by avoiding dangerous situations means that the problem has not gone away, but has been accommodated into your life. This is a powerful way of fueling the belief that you need to take special precautions to stay safe, that your worst fear is in fact true. Avoidance also means limiting your life in some way and can be very destructive. And so Jeremy returns. Let's see what he's up to, shall we? Jeremy began to get more thoughts that he didn't love the baby, and that he might want her to die. When he had these thoughts, he would turn away from the baby and repeat, "I love you, and I don't want you to die." He felt very ashamed at having these thoughts. Soon Jeremy began to make excuses so he did not have to look after the baby. much to the annoyance of his partner, who wasn't aware of how serious his concerns were. He started to question himself in other areas of life, such as whether he loved his partner or had in fact loved his parents. He was very preoccupied for most of the time. Although other people may not have been able to tell, for Jeremy, life was completely clouded by OCD. Poor Jeremy. I hope he gets it together by the end of this book, although it might not tell us. Might be like that last one we dealt with. I want to say her name was Jenny, but I don't think it was. Jeremy was unable to resolve his doubts by mental argument and reassurance, so he began to change his life to fit around the OCD, just in case they were true. This began to have a huge effect on his mood and on those around him. His behaviour fueled his belief that he was capable of something terrible, as he acted as though this was true. Summary. As with other forms of OCD, in rumination OCD, it is how you interpret the fact you have negative thoughts that causes the anxiety. The compulsions come in the form of mental checks or arguments that attempt to prove that your interpretation is wrong. And we have a nice little diagram. I'm going to read this one. So you have two columns. One is safety-seeking behaviour. And the other is how it keeps the problem going. So let's start. Safety-seeking behaviour. Mentally reviewing events. How it keeps the problem going. This is a form of checking. It keeps focus on danger and increases doubt, undermines confidence in memory, keeps you feeling anxious. Safety-seeking behaviour. Thought suppression. Actually, it looks like I've had a stroke, but I do like this. That's probably just the angle of the camera. I hope I'm not having a stroke. Would admit it doesn't feel like it, but... what is that? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Anyway, thought suppression. Trying to suppress thoughts makes you have more of them. In order not to think of something, you need to think of what it is you are trying to push away. Which is very true. The more you think about it, so let's come over an event. I want you to not think about this event. Think about the 2002 World Cup when South Korea reached the semi-finals. Now don't think about that, alright? Do not think about it at all. Especially you. You know who you are. Okay? Now try not to think about it, because that's all you can think about now. Especially if you're my age or older. If you're younger than me, you probably do it because you're like, what the hell is that? Anyway, let's carry on, shall we? Asking for reassurance. Reassurance is a form of checking. It may give you temporary relief, but ultimately makes you feel less certain, as you'll always be able to pick holes in the answer. That is very true. Avoidance. Avoidance means that the beliefs remain unchallenged, as you are acting as if it is true. Your obsessional beliefs feel more true. Okay, another one. We will have anxiety. Let me read that. Anxiety-related belief. Can you see that? So you have anxiety-related beliefs and how it keeps the problem going. Thinking something is as bad as doing it. This means that thoughts on themselves are a source of danger. It is impossible not to have these thoughts. That is very true. We all have bad thoughts from time to time. I mean, you may have an argument with someone, you may think, I wish that person was dead. An overreaction, but we have them all. Now, some people will have that thought and they'll think, I really want this person dead. I'm a horrible person. I'd probably hire a hit person if I could. A trained killer. However, it's a natural thought to have. Because we all have negative thoughts and extreme emotions at times. It's only natural, it's what makes us human. But the key is to look past that thought and say, yes, I had that thought, but it doesn't mean I actually want that thing to happen. Am I clear? Let's carry on. I'm a bad and dangerous person, or I wouldn't be having these thoughts. Because you're worried about being bad, you're on the lookout for bad thoughts. Therefore, you will notice every thought that fits with this idea and you'll generate more such thoughts. If this seems like evidence, then the belief will strengthen. This is a vicious circle. In order to feel safe, I need to be completely certain that I won't do something wrong. However, it is impossible to achieve a sense of certainty about obsessional doubts. The more you try to be certain, the less certain you'll feel, and so you'll get stuck in a vicious circle. The thoughts I have mean that something fundamental about me. This belief will drive you to try to work out what the true meaning of the thought is. Sometimes you just got to stop thinking about things. Easier said than done, I know, but you should try. Anxious thoughts can damage my brain. This is, of course, an anxiety-provoking thought and is an OCD trap. And that is, I'm going to finish this tonight. I know it's not quite as long as normal, but we're on to religion. The next bit is about religious OCD or scrupulosity. See? I think it's a good time to end it. I'm not particularly religious, as you know, as I've mentioned on a lot of videos, but it's worth going over because some people are. And I hope you're well, people. I hope you're happy. I hope you're not having too many of those damn intrusive thoughts. So until next time, take care of yourselves, people. Bye.